It's the end of an era. This is Season 7 of Buffy, the highlight reel. And I do just quickly want to say thank you to all of you for allowing me this passion project and coming along with me on this journey through years of televisual entertainment. And I guess this is more for the people who aren't big Angel fans and are really not that interested in watching my opinions on it because they don't really have a base of reference. So whilst it is, of course, to everyone, I just want to make sure to thank those people who won't be joining us for that leg of the journey into the end of the year. But I also want to thank everyone involved in making this happen. That's from Joss himself, of course, through the cast, including various bit part players who I've been interested in the careers of following this, right through the writers. I mean, there's many of those who've gone on to things that you also probably enjoy. Just as one example, if you're a fan of Once Upon a Time, there's a lot of Jane Espenson there, and it kind of explains why Emma Caulfield appeared in it a couple of times too. And also Ian Bailey, who was in the pack way back in Season 1 of Buffy. So there's a lot of connections with the greater televisual world, but a lot of behind-the-scenes crew as well. You know, Kerry Meyer, really, I think, the production designer, is a lot of, or who we have to thank for a lot of the visual identity of Buffy. You know, that's the production designer's job. Tell us what world we're in. Make it so when we watch an episode, we know that this is this world. So, you know, he did a great job. The various composers throughout the years, obviously standout Christoph Beck, but this last year with Robert Duncan, great work. Four-Star Mary, I think, deserves some praise as well for being the real-life backing for Dingoes Ate My Baby. And I'm really glad that, you know, some of the members who didn't get to be on screen because their roles were taken over by actors did get to appear to do the exposition song in Restless back in Season 4. But also quickly want to just give my last thoughts on the reboot before it happens and before we close out this whole thing. This team of people that have come together to make this what it is, you know, is this team of people, the various talents and skill sets and comedic mentalities that they brought to the table are entirely theirs. Even if you get most of the gang back together, it's not the whole gang back together, and it will be a separate thing. And that's fine. I hate people who say things like, you've ruined my childhood because of this, you know, if someone reboots a property. The thing that you enjoyed in your childhood still exists. And as long as you haven't got the awful remasters, where they didn't respect the bounds of the normal shot, and so we see things that we shouldn't, the original episodes of Buffy still stand up relatively well, and we can still watch them. A reboot does not remove those from your life. You know, whether you were watching them as a child or teens or 20s, I know there are people who are well into the 50s and 60s who have also enjoyed Buffy and gotten life lessons that you wouldn't have expected them to pick up from something aimed primarily at teens. It has a universal appeal, and that will never go away. I think, really, I should paraphrase Buffy herself, Sarah Michelle Gellar, here, to really echo my main sentiments, that the need to reboot isn't really there. That's my general opinion on it. The lessons that it's taught us, the lessons that it's shown us, still exist. There are a few tiny little things based on how technology is so intrinsic in our lives now that wasn't quite the case back then, that maybe we need lessons on, but the lessons that Buffy has given us over the years still hold true. While she didn't say it, just to clear the whole legal side there, I'm not saying Sarah Michelle Gellar said this, but my instinct, my cynical instinct, is cash grab. But, like I say, it does not detract from what we've enjoyed, way back when. So, on to what we're all here for, nearly halfway probably through this video, and we'll actually talk about the standout episodes of this season. So the first one I really want to talk about is, whilst I could talk about some of the really early ones, I think the one that really gave us the idea of stakes, pun totally not intended there, is Help. Because this was Buffy learning the first lesson, really, to be a good general, to be a good leader for the end of the season. And that is people may die, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. You can prepare as best you can make as many contingency plans as you can, but people will still die. The earlier you can accept that, the better. Awful as it sounds, this is a lesson that real-life generals have to accept, have to learn. And it's not easy. I'm not saying at all it is. as sort of sentient and sort of caring beings, we don't want people to die around us. But we have to accept that sometimes it's out of our control. And Buffy has very much a martyr complex, which really got worse as time went on. That's one of the big criticisms, I will say. And it is hard for her to deal with, but this is something that had no mystical means, because after, she does stop what she thought was the cause. She stops the cult, and I will get into the whole causality thing that raises in a minute. But Cassie's heart just gives out because she had a condition, and the stress just is enough. That's it. It's game over. And like I say, it's such a hard lesson to learn. But like I say, I do want to touch on the causality thing as well, because the group only chose her because of the poetry she was writing. She was writing that poetry because she'd seen that she was going to die on a specific date, and was kind of coming to terms with that and accepting it herself. So there's this weird kind of, it's almost like a bootstraps paradox, which one of the best examples I've heard given, I think I talked about it in my predestination video a bit as well, but if you go back in time and sort of whistle or hum or whatever Beethoven's Fifth to Beethoven, who created Beethoven's Fifth? And that's what it is, because obviously it had to exist somewhere in your mind for you to sing it at him, and you know it as Beethoven's Fifth because that's what you've grown up with, but you going back and giving it to him is why he wrote it. And that's it. That's what this paradox is, Cassie's supposed original death, if Buffy hadn't got involved, would have been caused by the poetry she was writing because she'd foreseen her death. It's very much chicken and the egg without an easy solution if you're thinking of it evolutionarily. It's always the egg. No one said it was a chicken's egg. That's what this episode is. It's literally Buffy coming to terms with the fact that sometimes people die. And it does segue us nicely into the second episode I want to talk about, which I think is pretty obvious from me saying that, conversations with dead people. Because I do think it was better, in a way, to have Cassie sort of being a mouthpiece for Tara. Because I think if we saw Amber Benson on screen sort of actually emoting and everything like that, I think it would have hit a lot harder. It would have been a lot harder even perhaps for Alison to play, if she really sort of does get into character very well. It would have been a very difficult day on set, I think, for everyone involved. And this just allowed it to have the menace. I think seeing Amber fold in upon herself like that would have also been quite unsettling for those of us who were still kind of grieving over the Tara death. So it really had a nice impact. And of course it led us into the idea that, the first is trying to manipulate them. And we do kind of think to ourselves, it's like, well, obviously Cassie here is a manifestation of the first. But can there be multiple places at once? Is Joyce a manifestation trying to sort of sour Dawn against Buffy? Was the thing trying to stop her the first because it's like, no, don't warn her, because then she'll be alert and it'll screw up my plans. Obviously Holden couldn't have been, because we saw actual physical interaction with them, which the first cannot do. So it was a great way to sow the seeds, though, and also sow the seeds of the whole Spike reveal, that even though he's ensouled now, somehow he's been used as a sleeper agent and going out and killing people. But it was a great episode, and it's notable that this is the only episode that Nicholas Brendon doesn't appear in. Everyone else does, but he's basically not in it. It's quite weird. He's the only cast member, I think, to have done that. But we do get, obviously, throughout the season, we get the introduction of the potentials, and that segues me into the next episode, which again ties a bit from conversations. There's still a lot of guilt with Willow. She still holds on to that, and this burgeoning relationship with Kennedy, who played brilliantly, by the way, by E.R.A. Limon. I actually have played some of L.A. Noire, and it was really jarring to me to see her as the first person in that. But anyway, yeah, this episode, The Killer in Me, was a great one. Because it really got us to embrace the idea that, Willow is still, she's not fully healed. She's still got this grief, she's still got perhaps a bit of anger in her there. And this guilt manifests as Warren. And okay, I know Amy had a hand in it, but I think there's still a lot of Willow there. And it's great how Adam Bush and Alison Hannigan have obviously studied each other enough to convincingly portray each other portraying the other, if that makes sense. I think it's great how they embody that, I mean, particularly Warren. I think, we've spent years and years and years with Willow. We know how she moves, we know how she acts. And yes, we've seen how she's grown up a lot over the years as well. But, I think he had the bigger job, because trying to act like a cast regular, we spent a lot of time seeing them. So I think he does a great job with it. And at the end, it is like a fairy tale. She has to kiss the beast, if you will, to release him. And, I just think it was such a great way of getting us closure on the Tara situation. It got the character closure, it led us... I think the idea was to let us allow this relationship to happen. And I know a lot of people still hate it. Like, oh, what have you got for the spoiled brat, blah, blah, blah. But that's everything. The next episode is really a story of growing up, and that's Storyteller. Because we needed Andrew to really stop just using, his imagination as a way of avoiding responsibility for what he's done. He's done some unspeakable things. He's killed his best friend. He's, partaken in some really nefarious plans by previous involvement with Warren. And yeah, this episode is really funny and light, and and silly in places, like the reimagining of the climactic battles with Willow in season 6, and the "We Are Gods" bit, which was absolutely brilliant. But this is a story about growing up. This is really, again, Buffy in a nutshell. It's like, we've grown up using fantasy to help us deal with problems, but this is saying, look, all well and good, but moderation. Sometimes you need to tackle this stuff head on. But the only way that Buffy knows to get through to him is to tell him the story. Whilst he's romanticising all these different interactions and things like that, and making this fantasy version, Buffy cottons on the fact that we need to basically just get this out of Andrew. He needs to stop with this. So they drag him over the seal and make him cry. But telling him that they're going to sacrifice him because, well, how else did you think it was going to work? You have to be sacrificed, blood for blood. And it makes him cry, it makes him feel remorse. He learns to accept what he's done. And Buffy, throughout its run, has been very much a proponent of redemption. Look at Angel, for example. But this idea that, redemption is possible. You have to want it. And you have to work at it. But it is possible. And this is an example of that. This is the mark, I think, or this is the point that Andrew started to really grow up, which is what made him eligible to be a watcher in further material. And I think it was done really well. Tom Lang, I have great respect for, because he plays the really silly, childlike elements of Andrew, as well as the emotional weight. It's very hard to cry convincingly, but he does it really well here. But I do want to now talk about, I suppose, another angle of redemption, but sort of married against revenge. And that's Lies My Parents Told Me, where we have Robin Wood, who I keep wanting to call Principal Wood like I'm actually at school, and Spike's backstory gets expanded on even further. I mean, we've had a lot of Spike's backstory over the years, but this is, I think, a really important part of his backstory. And of course, why the trigger was what it was. But it's such a different kind of circumstance. We have Robin, who idolised his mother, and was really sad that she died, of course, at Spike's hands, and weirdly got recast in different seasons. But we'll not talk about that. Then we had Spike, who adored his mother and thought the same, but of course turned her into a vampire out of love and was burned by her. But he really understands, he comes to terms with it through this episode, and he gets it. He's like, whilst, that being that I'd created was horrible and evil, that was the demon talking. As a vampire, I know that. The demon's what has you. My mother may have thought those things, but her love for me meant that she supported me. She was always on my side. That's what she was always trying to do. She just wanted me to be the best I can. And at the end of the day, whatever else happens...
My mother loved me with all her heart. That was her world.
Whereas Robin was always second. The slaying would always come first. And, it does create a bit of a rift with Buffy. Quite rightly. She even says, like, I'd let him, to be fair. Spike could have killed you. He didn't. I wouldn't really have batted an eyelid if he did. We need to all work together. Again, part of what I was saying earlier about her moulding into a better general, a better leader, is acknowledging that these petty squabbles between us all shouldn't exist. And of course this causes a rift with Giles as well, because he sanctions this. It's like, if you need to kill him, fine. He's a distraction to Buffy. Giles really starts to become the villain in a sense, but in a way he's kind of right. He needed to make sure that Buffy's mind was in the right place. She shouldn't be shielding Spike over anyone else. And I think it was an important lesson for both of them. But of course we then have, I think, the last few episodes, which really need to be taken as one. The run from Dirty Girls all the way through, where we get the return of Faith after she's broken out of prison by the Angel crew. We've had sort of Willow go over there and help the sort of mind walk in Angel's mind, and like I say, brought Faith back. And of course the introduction of Caleb, who was my first introduction to Nathan Fillion and made me go, I want to watch this guy in everything, so I have in a lot of things. I do think he's a great actor and just a really funny guy. But this whole last, the end of season arc, we had so many ups and downs. We had the sort of gouging out of Xander's eye, and things like that, and the talk about, the superpowers that they have even if they don't. And of course the final climactic episode where the lessons we learned of some people will die and there's nothing you can do about it, come to fruition. We of course have, great moments of Felicia Day's character, who I really haven't talked about in this because, she's such a weird character in this, but it's what put her on my radar too. And since then, I've really sort of followed her career and everything like that. But all these people sort of came together, and like the end fight and everything was done, and we had the wonderful denouement. But I think one of the greatest parts of this end run is Willow's fear when they find the scythe. Is this idea that they're going to tap into the power and make everyone, whether they were, going to be chosen at some point down the line, or whether they were just a potential to be on the sidelines. Every single one who could be a Slayer will be a Slayer. And of course there are repercussions that are dealt with in supplemental media after the fact. Some of them are driven crazy by it because they've not got a support network around them or anything like that. But the idea that, Buffy started to a lot of people as like an anomaly. This is a female empowerment thing. The woman is the strong character. She's the lead. It was very novel at the time, trust me. And to end on the fact that, but it isn't just Buffy. Every single woman out there, every single girl, through to woman, has the power. If you are being oppressed, you can stop it. If you feel terrified for any reason, you can overcome it. And we see a lot of this, the girls, so like the one that really got me, I think I was like floods of tears the first time with the wonderful stirring music, was the girl in the trailer park, is about to be hit and she just stops and just stands up. She's like, no more. I'm not taking this abuse. That one really got me. I abhor abuse in all its forms. And it was such a powerful moment. I loved it. And it was great. But this idea that, Willow's so scared of this power, but then she does it and is the most pure being in the world. She doesn't go dark and evil anymore. When tapping into like immense power, when utilising this force, she is borderline goddess. And this is what Buffy's all about. It's the silly, it's the serious, it's the funny, it's the horrific, it's the loss and the laughs, but it's also empowerment. As was said in the first episode, it's all about power, who's got it and who's willing to use it. Whilst this season is a circuit, if you will, we come back to school and everything like that, We have the nods to Welcome to the Hellmouth at the end of this last episode. It's also circuitous as a season. We start the season talking about power, and we end the season talking about power, pretty much. And of course, we have a certain little gemstone, a little piece of jewellery that Spike wears after getting quite uppity about the return of Angel, which segues him into joining the ranks of Wolfram and Hart in Angel next month, as it will be for us. But, like I say, I mean, this has been a longer video than I intended because I wanted to talk about so much and sort of talk about the reboot a bit, get all that stuff out, so I apologise it's kind of run over long a little. But I love this series, I loved what it stood for, I loved the lessons it gave me, and I can't wait to close out the year next time with one of the better seasons of Angel, which again was its last year, and had so many ups and downs, and married the silly and the serious really well. It gave us some really heavy moments, but that's for next month. For now, I'm done with Buffy. Well, talking about it, I will still continue to watch it, and like I say, I'll give the reboot a go, maybe do a video on it down the line, who knows. But like I say, thank you all for allowing me this passion project, joining me on the journey. And yeah, more coming in the future. If you've seen the update video, I've got a lot of plans moving forward. Everything's going to be changing. It's going to be great, and I can't wait to find some more passion projects to do for you all. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take care.